Hello and welcome to the OneMedicine Podcast from today's practitioner. In each episode, we share the expertise of a respected thought leader. Some you'll know and others you'll probably meet for the first time. We cover topics important to you, always with a focus on improving the health outcomes of the patients you treat while expanding your understanding of the many healing modalities being used today. Hi, I'm Rob Lutz. I'm the host of the OneMedicine Podcast, and with me today is Dr. Chris Meletis. We've had him on the show a couple times, and Chris is just great. Love having you on the show, Chris. We've got a lot of great content that you've provided to us over the course of the last year or so, particularly around the endocannabinoid system, and recently posted a webinar that you did on pain and sleep, which is really what we want to talk about here today. For those of you who don't know Chris, I'll give you a quick bio, but it's going to be in the show notes. And like I said, he's got a lot of content, a lot of great stuff for you to dig deeper into if you'd like to on the website, Today's Practitioner. I'll include links to that as well. So Chris Meletis is a naturopath, licensed naturopath. He's an educator, international author, and lecturer. His personal mission is changing America's health one person at a time. Chris has authored 18 books and over 200 national scientific articles in journals, including Natural Health, Alternative Complementary Therapies, Townsend Letter for Doctors and Patients, Life Extension, Natural Pharmacy, NDNR, and several journal articles on PubMed.gov. Dr. Meletis served as Dean of Naturopathic Medicine and Chief Medical Officer for 7 years for the National College of Naturopathic Medicine, now the National University of Natural Medicine. He was awarded the 2003 Physician of the Year by the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. He has a deep passion for helping the underprivileged and spearheaded the creation of 16 free natural medicine healthcare clinics in the Portland metropolitan area of Oregon. So, Chris, welcome to the show, and really appreciate you coming back on to talk about sleep, which obviously is a critical piece of everybody's health and sometimes overlooked, how I think that can impact lots of other areas of people's health. So we're going to talk about the importance of sleep, some of the challenges and obstacles, I think, to that. Hopefully you'll provide some easy ideas for practitioners to guide their patients and so forth. But I'll turn it over to you to just kind of tee us up what you want to talk about today in that area. And I'll ask questions as we go along. So again, thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, everybody, for listening. So sleep, it can be elusive. And as we get older or life happens and stress happens, we have sleep issues. And of course, when we talk to our patients, we have to translate all of our science into English. That's the key to really getting our patients to understand and own our recommendations. And so one of the things I always share with my patients is something you probably do as well. And it's called looking at the word restoration. If we want to restore our body, we have to have rest. The first four letters of restore or restoration is rest. And if we're not sleeping, we're going to end up with, of course, waxing and waning of multiple pathways, or circadian rhythm, or cortisol pathways, or gonadal hormone pathways, and sense of pain, sense of aches, and just depression and anxiety and everything else. And so, getting a good night's sleep is so paramount. We all know this individually, let alone as practitioners. So, of course, we like to rule out sleep apnea, and I think we've all seen patients in our practice like, well, wow, that person that came in with a diagnosis of sleep apnea, but they're thin and skinny and they don't have any of the criteria, but they might be hypoventilating. And then there's the other individuals which have very severe apnea. They're also thin. Lots of them, of course, are heavier because it does have something to do with the circumference of your neck. So ruling out sleep apnea. And we always were taught in school, all of us, no matter what our provider final degree was, that, we had to stay hydrated, we have to eat well, but the prime directive is oxygenation. So making sure our patients got great oxygen, and thanks now to technologies and the Oura Ring and our smartwatches, we can kind of see where we're at with the oxygen levels. But so that's foundational. But then the question is, what interrupts our sleep? Pain, a lot of time. It's my neck, it's my shoulder, it's whatever. So we want to address that. But I gave a lecture about a decade ago at the Integrated Health Symposia in New York, and I flew in at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm an Oregonian, so I'm PST or PDT all the way along. So I said, great, I'm at 11, I'm now in New York, I find my room, crash, and my talk's at 7 a.m. And I'm an extemporaneous speaker. I have my slides. I'll tell you what the slides mean. But what's interesting, I said, I'm standing up here waiting for the audience to come in, 300-400 medical doctors and other healthcare providers. And I says, as I started, I'm going to tell you lots of things about genetics and epigenetics, but I says, how many cells in my body must be tired before I perceive tired? That was just and I says, you're welcome to answer. I know you're usually in the listening mode, but as we get going here, if anybody knows the answer, how many cells in the human body must be tired? We have some 37.2 trillion cells. Not sure who counted those, but it's like, how many cells have to be tired? And are they brain cells? Are they adrenal cells? So how many cells do you have to have that are tired in your adrenal glands before you have adrenal burnout? Or how many cells do you have to have before you perceive at the cerebral level, oh, I'm tired? And no answer. I said, you're welcome afterwards to tell me if you know the answer. But I can tell you know lots of things I don't know the answer. I says, let me ask you another question. And once again, I had none of this planned, but I'm tired and my adrenal glands are still asleep over in Oregon, even though I was in New York. I says, I held up my index finger. I says, how many cells in my finger have to hurt before I perceive pain? And I said, you're welcome to chime in. Once again, I don't know the answer. I'm being humble here. And I once again said, I know lots of things about genetics and epigenetics. And once again, a decade ago, that was cutting edge. And I said, but before we even address that, I said, you might make a recommendation of acetaminophen or ibuprofen or maybe arnica, or you might suggest putting ice on it. But shouldn't I, remove the splinter, okay, to address the cause? But I says, when it comes back to that pain, have we all not had the splinter in our finger before? And it's been a big splinter and it hurt a little bit, but then we got a baby splinter, one of those micro splinters, they hurt more. And I said, and have we not been in the kitchen and we cut down a little cut to our finger with a knife, but then we get a paper cut and the paper cut hurts more. So a micro splinter can hurt more than a big splinter, and a paper cut can hurt more than a big cut, like with a knife. And it's like, how much do we know about the human body? How much don't we know? I mean, it's kind of like a little on and off. So when it comes to sleep, clearly we need sleep, we need oxygenation, and we need both quality and quantity of sleep. And one of the things with sleep is, how's your bed partner? If you have a bed partner or a cat or a dog that's your bed partner and they snore, that's going to interrupt your sleep. So, and the concept of I'm just going to throw a pillow over their head, that's actually not ethical. If anybody's wondering about whether it's okay to do that, smothering is not good. It does work, but it's not good. And so it's like, even your partner's sleep and sleep habits impact you. So we're going to talk today about sleep and also pain, and I'll let you lead the way. So of course, we're going to talk about the cannabinoid system, and we're going to talk about things which we can do for sleep quality as well, but also pain. Sleep and pain go hand in hand.
So let's talk about, what happens to the patient when they haven't been sleeping well for a while. And then we can talk about what maybe is causing that and what we can do to help address that. But what happens to their body if, let's say, they're talking about a few weeks where they're really just not getting their 8 hours, they're not getting the deep sleep or the REM sleep that really helps restoration. What's happening to their body?
Okay. The first thing, and probably the most primary thing, is we're not clearing out our cerebral spinal fluid, where we need to drain the brain. So like we've heard people say, drain the swamp. Well, we need to drain the brain. If we're not draining our brain with good restorative sleep, we get toxic metabolites. The other thing is when you and I are awake and conscious and alert, well, it takes norepinephrine and epinephrine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, takes serotonin and dopamine and acetylcholine, which are a memory neurotransmitter, to be alert and awake. Now, if we're not having enough downtime to replenish the presynaptic junctions, then all of a sudden we're more flat, we're more depressed, we're more anxious, we're more forgetful, we're looking to find words. And I don't propose sleep deprivation as a torture, but if I was to run a location to torture individuals, I would not need to waterboard anybody. I would just literally keep them up and I'll get whatever I want from them because it's literally torment. And so of all my patients over the last 33 years, sleep deprivation, you get that taken care of, you address that. And once again, addressing the cause. Is it anxiety? Is it that they can't shut down their mind? Or is it that their body hurts? Recently, I've been having a rotator cuff issue that prevents me to sleep on my right side. And even when I sleep on my left side, it actually, and of course, sleeping on the left side and the right side is better for training the brain than on your back, by the way. Then it's like, so now I'm having disruptive sleep. I'm consciously aware of flip-flopping multiple times a night because of discomfort and pain. So what's beautiful about using the endogenous cannabinoid system and natural anti-inflammatories is you're addressing an endogenous process, but also sleep deprivation. We know that shift workers generally die quicker than people that don't work at night. And so that is that disruption of that circadian rhythm. So we've all are aware of the amber glasses. So if we're looking at a blue screen at night, we need to, whether it be the television, our phone, or whatever. And there's, of course, the dark mode or evening mode on many of the smart devices. But we know, okay, well, we need to prevent that white light or blue spectrum light from going into our eyes, because our ancestors, they wanted to do something at night. They get a little fire, had an amber red hue to it, none of this white, bright stuff. And so when we start throwing off our circadian rhythm, not only does our melatonin levels drop, then, of course, melatonin, we say, oh, that's the thing that helps us sleep. All of your audience and the people I generally talk to know, hey, melatonin is so much more.
So much more.
It's just sleep. Yeah. It helps with cytokines. In fact, during the COVID era, I think we're done with the COVID era, but I'm not sure. So, but I'll just put during the COVID era, we learned in the peer review literature, which you can just go to PubMed, melatonin acts as a natural cytokine dampener, controls those inflammatory pathways. We know it's an antioxidant. We know it helps with immunological function. So we're not sleeping. We're going to be more likely to get ill. We're more likely to not be the most personable individual that we could be, and let alone the most competent. And the research shows for those with overt sleep apnea, and we don't have to have overt sleep apnea to be sleep deprived. They're worse, equal or worse than a drunk driver driving. So it's like, decrease of fine motor skills, gross motor skills, and executive function with lack of sleep. So if you haven't been sleeping at all, don't make any major decisions. Don't get in a major argument and think you're going to win with your partner. Just kind of say, okay, I'm going to wait until I can get some sleep under my belt.
I'm going to sleep on this one. Yeah.
I'm literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
And I give my patients little hacks. I think we all do as providers of, okay, well, go with a little piece of paper, put it on your nightstand, have a pen ready, and don't turn on the light, but just write down a word or two. So you're not saying all night long, I can't forget that. It's really important for tomorrow. Just jot it down real quick. And then, but with the light off, just kind of, chicken scrawl, or in our case, often Dr. Scrawl. And it's like, okay, that will be my reminder, the word the, or food, or whatever. We just need to shut down our brains. And we're out of touch with our ancestral knowledge and our ancestral wisdom or we decompressed. I think you're an avid biker, if I remember, bicycling.
Yeah, that's right.
And, bicycling is great. Exercise, physical exhaustion. You also connect with nature, unless you're doing it on a Peloton or something in your room. But even then you can screen nature, but being out in nature and grounding ourselves is important. So, but once again, inflammation, the endogenous cannabinoid system, all very, very important. And even with pain, which we're going to talk about pain and sleep, I find that pain is a big pain in the, when it comes to not sleeping. And so I like to look at what we know and what we don't know about pain. So I would love to talk about how what we used to think about ibuprofen and acetaminophen, so think Advil and think Tylenol, is that, well, they work on a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory pathway. Yes, on the ibuprofen. The acetaminophen's always been a little bit more nebulous as to how it works, but now we know both of them work via the endocannabinoid system, or some say cannabinoid system. And so the question is, how does ibuprofen and the endogenous cannabinoid system work? So if you're not in pain and you're blissful and you're asleep, this is good. So let's control the pain. Well, we now know that ibuprofen actually causes fatty acid amide hydrolase, the substance that normally breaks down anandamide, which is, of course, we know the word anandamide is Sanskrit for bliss, I think for blissful sleep or counting sheep. And so what we want to do is like, so it actually helps block, this is ibuprofen, helps block the F-A-A-H, which breaks down anandamide. So now all of a sudden I'm augmenting my bliss endocannabinoid or cannabinoid system. And it's like, wow, and I'm more blissful and I'm not in as much pain. Likewise, on acetaminophen, another mechanism there is it actually works to actually augment the CB1 receptor. So we know CB1 used to be only central nervous system and CB2 only periphery within the body. And now we know also about TRPV1, the GGPPR55, onwards, and the 5HA1, and multiple other pathways in which the endocannabinoid system work. But when I'm at conferences, I'm talking about CBD, and I say, well, of course, we know about the endocannabinoid system. No, most of us were not trained in it in school. And if we were, we're more recent practitioners, graduates. And they're like, well, how does that tie into everything? Well, if you're not sleeping, Well, your circadian rhythm, we just talked about melatonin, that's going to be askew, but so is your cortisol levels are going to be askew because, of course, that's our waking hormone. So our melatonin is dropping as we go around, 3 to 4 in the morning. Then up comes the cortisol around 5 to 7 in the morning, and it's waking us up. It helps the hunter gatherer in us wake up ancestrally because there wasn't refrigeration. And you were able to get enough energy from the cortisol spike in the morning to mobilize sugar to wake up and either start a fire or hunt and gather. But now we know with the endocannabinoid system that we have something called endocannabinoid deficiency. Dr. Russo did work on this, saying, hey, as we're dealing with our adrenal burnt out patients, and once again, if you're adrenal fatigued or adrenal spiking at night and can't get to sleep, well, because you're kind of wasted and then you get a little bit of a second wind, the proverbial night owl, well, then all of a sudden we're actually working on a deficit, but I think we're working on the adrenals, but we're also must address clinically the endogenous endocannabinoid system. And the fact that if our adrenals are worn out and waxing and waning, probably a parallel is the endocannabinoid system is also problematic. And when we're stressed, we think adrenals. Okay, our adrenals are going to go up. Sadly enough, we think adrenal cortex, only adrenal cortex. Of course, clinically, we were all trained. Well, what about the adrenal medulla? Well, the adrenal medulla is where we make adrenaline, noradrenaline. So we have our adrenal cortex, we got our glucocorticosteroids, cortisol, cortisone. And when we start getting worn out, not only as we just talked about ibuprofen and acetaminophen and how they act by modulating the natural systems of the endocannabinoid system, well, we now know that with the sleep deprivation, the cortisol and endocannabinoid system are also at play. And it is a study of cosmonauts. And they look at cosmonauts and they said, okay, we're going to throw you up in space at whatever G's and with no gravity, definitely an out of this world experience, literally, figuratively. And, but okay, well, you're going to say, well, they're just like our astronauts, they're military people. So they're pretty gestalt. They got their stuff together. They got a strong mindset because you can't really have or want an anxiety panic attack while you're free floating up in space. But what is interesting, the anandamide levels of the cosmonauts spiked. That's how they dealt with the stress.
How so?
So because they could feel gestalt and matter of fact, oh yeah, okay, well, it's all robotic. If this happens, this. They're working their algorithms and they're just zenned out and they're very mindful of that process. But they're endogenous cannabinoids. So when I work on using CBD, I'm helping inflammation, I'm helping pain, I'm helping natural processes that we still to this day are not smart enough to know. Of course, we know Metropolitan out of Israel did some additional work from the original studies that were the isolation of the CBD and the cannabinoids. I believe it was a Mexican physician from Mexico. And then it was furthered by Metropolitan and his group. But it's like we still don't know anything. I mean, we're babies on this pathway. And so just supporting and nurturing it. And research has shown that 42.5% of respondents actually reported sleeping better using CBD. And this is self-prescribers. And then we as clinicians know, we have patients come in all the time and they say, well, I tried magnesium and it didn't work. Or I took zinc and the zinc, did XYZ to me. Like, well, what zinc?
What form? Right.
What quality? And when it comes to the wild west of CBD, finding a high quality, high absorption product is really important. And ideally with some beta caryophyllene in it or some other substance. Like, of course, we know beta caryophyllene is also found in lavender. Well, if you go to the store and buy some Epsom salt, you might have lavender in it because of the aromatic effect, but it also has beta caryophyllene in it. And so it's like that synergistic effect of whole plant or broader plant, but also that delivery mechanism. And that's why I like to use the CBD with Vesisorb, which delivers 4.4 times more efficacy than just a plain old product that's out on the marketplace.
Yeah, something that I was thinking about as you were talking, this connection between pain and sleep. And, I understand that if you're sleep deprived, you're probably going to feel more pain. You're going to feel your aches and pains a little bit more. And that's going to make it harder to sleep. Or your cortisol levels are going up. It's going to make it harder to sleep. And seems like it's a feedback loop that kind of supports whatever dysfunction there might be, if that makes sense.
It's an amplifier.
Yeah.
It's like a stereo amplifier back in the day. You crank up your amp, you get more output. And
if you can't kind of break that cycle, whether it's taking CBD or again, some of these other hacks that you might recommend to a patient, if you can introduce that and kind of break that cycle, you can get the feedback loop working in your favor. So if you can get them to sleep better, their cortisol levels will probably start to come down. Their sense of pain and discomfort will probably come down. They'll help them sleep better. So I think that's what I've experienced myself personally. If I focus on my sleep, not just, and I take CBD and a few other things, I take some melatonin. I've tried some CBN, which seems to work pretty well. Though that for some reason that makes me feel a little groggy. It has a little bit of THC in it, so maybe that's what's causing that. But I feel if I focus on my sleep, it starts to improve. And when I sleep well, everything improves. I mean, just my day feels so much better.
And even your metabolism. I mean, everything works better. And that whole draining of the brain is very real. And for those of us that are in the senolytics and the healthy aging, anti-aging, or whatever, there's no such thing as anti-aging, let's call it healthy aging. As far as I know, there's nothing, if there's such a thing as anti-aging, it's still a secret.
Right.
But the concept of zombie cells, okay, well, maybe if we're not sleeping, it's not just zombie cells in our brain, but there's zombie cells throughout the entire body, because we're once again not flushing the proverbial commode of the body to flush it all out. And then we know as the adrenals go, so does the thyroid. You can't treat the thyroid without the adrenals if you're being holistic, because if all of a sudden I give somebody thyroid, and let's say you and I are sleep deprived and weren't savvy on how to augment our sleep. So now I'm tired. My adrenals are waxing and waning and they're toast. And now I'm going to support my thyroid. Let's say we were both hypothyroid, Hashimoto's or not. And so now all of a sudden I'm speeding up the body. Now all of a sudden the metronome that was tick tock like a sloth. Now we're more normalized. And all of a sudden, we're asking the adrenal glands to see life at the speed limit, because we were under the speed limit before. And now the question is, do our adrenal glands have that capacity to deal with it? So once again, CBD ties into the endocannabinoid system, and it ties into the adrenal glands. And one of my big issues I see with patients is when they get adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout, we do a 4-time salivary cortisol or urine, or if you're very, very conventional, you do an AM cortisol. I don't like the AM cortisol blood draws, because you still, unless you're in the hospital, you have to get out of bed, drive there, and you kind of get yourself going. So I like to have more of a home kind of test where you can roll out of bed, collect your body fluid and measure it. But if you're low in cortisol, the average healthy person makes 20 milligrams of hydrocortisone a day. Well, if you and I get a rash, we put hydrocortisone cream on, possibly. So actually, it was a really bad rash. Okay, I'm not proposing that's the solution. There's lots of other solutions, but it's a solution you can buy over the counter, surprise. Or if you have a tremendous inflammatory response, you'll be given methylprednisolone or prednisone. And so the question is, you're augmenting what your daily allotment is, but your adrenal fatigue, adrenal burnout, and instead of making your 20 milligrams, let's say you're making 12 or 14 milligrams, will you have breakthrough pain? Clearly, because of course you need 20 milligrams to help quench the daily fire. That's why our bodies ubiquitously make that, as most human beings do, that are healthy. Whatever healthy is, once again, most of us probably don't make that much. Now, excess amounts, problematic, it's going to alter our sleep. Insufficient amounts, more body pain, more body ache. And once again, I treat adrenals with, of course, our natural adaptogens and other supportive things and good quality sleep. But I also treat it with CBD to help that pathway. But when treating the adrenals and treating the thyroid, we have to do both of them, in my opinion, simultaneously. And
talk
remember
about that just a little bit, because that makes me, my niece, she's a college student, very stressful, world of academics, wants to do very well. And, so she has some anxiety. She is sleeping very poorly right now. And so just trying to think, what advice could I give her? She's a vegan. She eats pretty well, I think, but she's having a really hard time sleeping. Of course, then she's tired during the day, and she has, a fair amount of anxiety, which I think is fairly common these days, especially at that age.
I definitely would not want to be a young person. I mean, it's hard enough to be a young person when we were young people, and you're still young. But I mean, for me, it's like, I remember the 80s in high school, early 80s in high school, and I thought it was stressful. I can't even imagine high school and college these days with all the geopolitical stuff and all the worries. And when I grew up, before there were cellular phones, And I still remember snow on my television, which was, of course, when you had static, and then you would move the little rabbit ears, rabbits. So it's vegan friendly. And you try to get one of your 5 television things. We have too much connectivity.
Too much.
And once again, too much. And I like to always think back to we give so much accolade to Hippocrates, but also the Criticus, but lots of wise women that haven't been given all the credit they need to, that have fostered humanity over the years. But it's like, hey, no, here's Hippocrates, 400 BCE, and he's walking along and he says, okay, I'm zenning out with nature. There's not a whole lot of populace out there in Greece, right? And even though it was a very populous place, it wasn't like now in New York City or LA or even Portland, Oregon, where I live. And it's like, okay, he comes home and his wife says, you don't look like you feel very well. I don't. Well, eat this. It'll make you feel better. So his wife gives him some food, not from a stereotypical perspective, but hey, as a partner, hey, here, eat some food. Maybe it'll make you feel better. And I would say, I feel better. I should write this down. Food is your medicine.
Yeah.
It's like, who knows how it came, but whereas I give the example, if you and I were walking along on our cell phone, and the other day I was driving, got off the freeway and off a very, very busy and into a busy intersection, a gentleman's walking across 4 lanes of traffic. He had the right of way, he had the walk sign, but he's looking at his phone the entire time. Crazy. You can stumble, you can fall, and or you're trusting your fellow human being that may or may not be sleep deprived to actually stop and not run you over. But if all of a sudden there was a beautiful rainbow, a beautiful butterfly, or a burning bush, then all of a sudden it's like we wouldn't even be able to connect with it, because it's like we were glued to our dopamine fix of our shorts on TikTok or Instagram or whatever self-import thing that we have.
Yeah. No, I see she's on her device quite a bit, but I live close to the campus. It's UNH and University of New Hampshire. And I drove through there the other day. I've noticed over the last 5 years, my son is there as well, and he's graduating, finishing up his master's. I couldn't get over how many people, even if they were in a group, how many of them were just looking at their phone. And if it was somebody by themselves, they were definitely just staring at their phone and, missing out on the little things. Really, because what are they getting from that phone? And so I guess those people are probably in front of their phone, their device all day long at night. That's kind of raising their cortisol levels. It's stressful or whatever. And they're probably not going to sleep well and won't perform well in school and those types of things.
Well, and negative feedback, it's much like the song back in my day. And it goes, blah, blah, blah. It tells you about the plane crash with a gleam in her eye. And it's like, now all we're fed is negative news.
Yeah.
Tell me which channel do you hear? Fireman saves ducklings from storm drain. Mother deer reunited with her fawn. There's no channel. I'd watch it just because it's like, I want to hear good things. Or this human being helps elderly person load up their car or whatever. And the other day we were at a little bakery called Grand Central Bakery here, a local, and a homeless gentleman came behind us, and he actually asked the lady while I was ordering, hey, do you happen to have anything? So of course, this is not about me, but of course I ordered. I said, order whatever you want. I got you, because lest it be us one day, right? But where's the humanity? And I have a saying, hashtag humane humans for humanity. But if you sit at a restaurant, you and your partner, and you look and say, okay, well, I'm looking into your eyes. Now, I'm not saying I'm looking into your eyes, but I am actually right now, because we do have a video going along with the podcast. But it's like, are you looking into your partner's eyes, or you're looking in your phone while there's a human being in front of you? So many restaurants, you see everybody's on their freaking phone, but be present with the human being present and validate them and have that conversation, because we're losing our interpersonal skills and our ability to chat. But for your niece, obviously being vegan, where's her B vitamins? Of course, where's the low-lying fruit? And I'm going to assume because she's your niece, she's a dialed-in vegan. But but is she getting her B12? Is she getting her B complex? We also know that if she happens to be on an oral contraceptive and not Mirena, or maybe she's not on any of those, but then all of a sudden, that lowers folate levels. Well, that's part of neurochemistry. It also lowers the B vitamin. So one of my questions for all my patients, and I've just learned this over the years, do you remember your dreams 2 to 3 times a week? And I preface it with, I'm not going to be Freudian and Jungian, and we're not going to analyze your dreams. Just a yes or no. Do you remember your dreams 2 to 3 times a week? If the answer is no, B vitamins, a good solid B complex bioactive form. And then all of a sudden they dream, and I will share a story. A patient of mine, Jennifer, and her husband, David, Jennifer could not remember. She was an executive. She's a very accomplished lady. She was also earning the bacon and baking the bacon.
Yeah.
And very involved in her community and so forth and so on. And she said, I'm not dreaming. I said, well, that's a reflection of, of course, we know alpha and beta and delta sleep and so forth. I said, here's a free bottle, long-standing patient of mine, love her family. And I said, here's a free bottle of active B vitamins, all the benfotiamine, the riboflavin 5-phosphate, the, of course, proper form of folate, the methylene tetrahydrofolate onwards. And I said, I'm going to do something I rarely recommend for any, but I want you to take one of these right before you go to bed. And we know B vitamins can be kind of energizing and alter sleep.
Yeah.
He actually came back, 3-4 weeks later for some follow-up on blood work and hormonal imbalance and A1C and all that. And I said, hey, did you dream? She said, yeah. And it was weird. David was in a Mexican prison. And what's weirder is David also dreamt that he was in a Mexican prison. He had not been to Mexico. And he did not take the B vitamins. And it was not something, sweat lodge experience.
Yeah.
That it's like, wow, she actually was able to defrag. Because I'm sure if you haven't dreamt for a while, or I haven't dreamt for a while, all of a sudden, like we're kind of processing crud and emptying out the filing cabinets, or in today's world, we're cleaning up our desktop and putting things in the proper folder.
Right.
Sleep is important just to get rid of all the worries and stress from yesterday and yesteryear. And if you haven't slept for a while, you can't purge and process and somehow put it in a box.
What about sleepwalking? I'm a sleepwalker talker, especially when there's stressful things going on.
So other than bondage, how do you help with that? Because of course we can tie you down.
Yeah.
And I've had sleepwalkers. In fact, I've had a sleep baker and I had a sleep floor scrubber. And so she would wake up and she would bake bread while asleep and she'd scrub her floors, and her kids woke her up while doing that one time. And she was like, huh, what? And so I don't know if I have an answer for you on sleepwalking, other than, of course, it's a little bit more complex. And what I would be curious about for you is, where's your dopamine levels, but where's your GABA, where's your glutamate, where's your serotonin levels, where's your neuroinhibitory side, and also where your histamine levels. I'm not, of course,
do some testing.
But what I would say is I would do a urinary neurotransmitter test to see what is it uniquely about you. And is there, as the proverbial smoking gun, is there something out there that's saying, oh, wow, I'm really wired for sound, because you're breaking through the normal sleep and to the point that you're,
And I've done it since I was a little kid. Not every night, of course, but I'll go through phases of a week or so where it's almost every night I sleepwalk, sleep talk. I don't really leave the room or anything like that. It's usually I'm saving the family from the draperies or the ceiling fan, but maybe
what we do is we put down an electric keyboard with a recorder, and maybe maybe a computer next to you. And maybe you solve the world's problems just right there, and awesome. You find out you're the next Mozart.
That would be great. I could retire.
You're not stifled by all the daily worries. So now your neurochemistry is just kind of free flow.
Yeah, kind of getting back to your patients that are challenged with sleep. We've talked a little bit about some of the sleep hygiene things. I think most practitioners probably have that checklist of things to advise their patient. I guess maybe, and so there's supplements you can take. We talked about melatonin, we talked about CBD, some of the other terpenes that might be involved that could be helpful, different natural supplements to reduce pain and inflammation like curcumin. But, maybe something that could be helpful to a practitioner is, how do we get a patient to make these changes that will help them, right? So how do we get the kids to turn off their phone or go to bed at the same time every night, stay hydrated? What do you recommend to help influence the patient to make these types of changes?
And I think you have kids, as you shared, and I have kids. I think it's through example a lot. We all learn through example. We're all SM nature followers, consciously or subconsciously. So one of the things my kids, having been a doctor for so many years, my family's been interrupted by my phone. I remember one time in Disneyland, I was getting on the Matterhorn Mountain bobsled ride, and attendant said, you need to put your phone away. And look, I'm in the middle of a call with a patient. So why am I not immersed in? So now I leave my phone in my either back pocket, much like a young person, or I just leave it in the car and hide it in the car. And assuming it's not too hot, because then my kids get after, well, you can't leave your electrical devices in a car, it'll get too warm. So I get that little extra. But I think through example, the phone's not allowed at the table. The phone's not allowed after a certain amount of time. My wife and I've had this conversation. We're watching our little television in the evening. And it's like, okay, well, am I looking at my phone or am I there with her watching the show and chatting about whatever it might be? And so I think part of that's good. The hydration side of things, they say 38% of us underhydrate. We have a low thirst drive. So we'll eat instead of drink. Now, the key is not to drink or eat 2 to 3 hours before bed. Most of us, and I was one of them, when I was a younger doctor, I went to my ear, eyes, nose, throat guy and, expert medical doctor and ear, eyes, nose, throat. And he says, Chris, I think you have GERD. And I said, I don't think I have reflux. I don't have the classical heartburn. I don't have the need Mylanta, need whatever. And he says, Chris, who's the doctor next? I said, you are Dr. Lewis. and he says, okay, now that we got that established. And he also told me I need to do more Tai Chi and eat more salads, way ahead of the curve. It's like, okay, he was correct on both of those accounts as well. And because that mindfulness is very important, making time to be mindful, whatever a person's persuasion is, whether it's a structured spiritual belief system or just mindfully communing with nature, or I'm going to wake up in the morning and put my feet, if you're so fortunate as to have grass, I'm going to sit with my feet in the grass and drink my cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is that you're doing, or lemon water. But I think the other thing is, in his case, he says, I think you have reflux. He said, and of course, he's a medical doctor, so he prescribed protonics for me. And he says, but remember, Chris, of my patients which have irritation of the pharynx, larynx, sinuses, and for me, it was tonsils that I was seeing him for. And I had my tonsils out at 39, much to my chagrin, but they were constant problem. It's like, wow, 50% of people have silent reflux. And he said 25% of my patients have these sinusitis, pharyngitis, laryngitis, or GERD, don't know it. So he gave, of course, recommendation, don't drink or eat 2 to 3 hours before bed. And those, since we're not on video for the audience, here's a water bottle. And so this is an example of a water bottle, and the water bottle has a neck and a mouth to the bottle. That's what we call them, neck and mouth to the bottle. Now, since this is a very full bottle, this would be an example of a person that's going to bed with a full tummy. They've eaten within 2 to 3 hours, and they lie supine or prone. And of course, the fluid goes up past the lower esophageal sphincter, up into the neck and throat. So you toss and you turn and so forth. So you want to go to bed with very little in your tummy. And that's, I think, a no-brainer. But how do we change people's mindsets of being stressed and worn out? Is just share like what we're doing and like we all do as providers, these pearls, but also knowing that if you don't go to bed by 10 p.m., this is when you get your largest amount of growth hormone surge, which is also healthy aging and part of another circadian rhythm between growth hormone and IGF-1 and the feedback between the two. So not early to bed, early to rise to the extreme of a farmer or a previous ancestral person that didn't have the blue spectrum lights. But now we need to listen to the body. It has sustained humanity over a period of time. And no matter what a person's belief system is, you can't argue it, what has worked for humanity over time. You go to bed, you wake up, you eat, you exercise. And before, once again, all this technology, the way I went to high school, I didn't drive. I was poor. I bicycled 3 miles there, 3 miles back. And on the way back, there were hills and there was snow. And so, that story, snow, rain, sleep. That was me driving, exercising, and all of that. Now, what do? We have all the comforts of the modern world. And I think that's one of our biggest issues. That we need to connect with over half the population, which don't have the westernized conveniences and live like they are in terms of losing some of our technology. The world's not going to end while we're watching, if we don't have our phone with us. And there are ways to set your phone to, if it's really important, a family member could break through a silent mode. Yeah.
I think it's hard to kind of suppress if there's a lot of good food in front of you, not to eat it all. If there's a lot of sugary foods, I think we're probably evolved to want to eat as much as possible when it's in front of us. Or, we've got this stimulating phone with all this great, what we think is fun stuff. And so it's hard to put that down, not realizing like, hey, this is going to have an impact over time. And so that can be, I think, challenging, to.
Well, and once again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer and I'm definitely not an anti-technology person, but during the whole COVID era, 5G rolled out. And so if you have your 5G signal on, the moment we come home, we turn off our cellular and we just work on our wireless network.
Right.
Because it's like, why would I want a 5G device in my hand?
Yeah.
And because we've had sick kitty cats, so one had FIP, feline infectious peritonitis, which is fatal. But there's actually a drug analog from Gilead Labs. Gilead Labs is the drug company that made remdesivir that was given in the hospitals. But there's an analog that's been known for 10 years in the veterinary medicine world. It's GS something or another. And if you give your cat, which has usually about 106 plus degree temperature, cats are supposed to be a high of 102.5. So we had a sick cat. So we said, well, we're not going to add a 5G to their burden. Mm-hmm. So we just went to wireless in our home. Mm-hmm. Whenever we're home, we turn off our cellular. And of course, we're not, inducing our cells, and we're electrical chemicals ourselves.
Sure.
And so are the kitty cats. So why would we introduce a frequency or whatever to the cats? So I think looking back and say, we know about Roundup, we know about other toxins and pollutants, we try to avoid those. And most of us, as we can afford it, go organic, we do all this. So this is just, once again, an unknown variable that is probably not helpful. And the moment we have this conversation with people that we love, that TikTok, Instagram, all use algorithms that mess around with our dopamine levels. They give you a feed, and it's something you really wanted, that proverbial dark chocolate, whatever. And it's like, no, we're being manipulated. We're being manipulated. We have too much technology, and also kinking our neck down and forward to look at our phone. I remember talking to a VP of Nike, because Nike headquarters is here, and she had chronic neck pain. And she first came into my practice, she was on Vicodin, which eventually became Norco, because they lowered the amount of acetaminophen and the same amount of the hydrocodone. And she said, I need more. My neck hurts. I says, I want you not, because she was very proud of herself. She was my age. And she walked around Nike campus. She said, I get 3 or 4 texts or emails done walking across the campus, looking down with your neck that hurts, right?
Yeah.
And I said, and she flew to Paris and New York and China and so forth and so on. And I said, I want you to sit in the airplane with your bag on your lap and a pillow. And I don't want your iPad to be any lower than your eye level. Because we do that with our monitors.
Right.
There's all these things that just seem so intuitive. And what's the benefit of a functional medicine providers? We talk to our patients, we chat with them, and we can just mention, hey, eye level, don't be looking down. And once again, it's not good for our neck. Then, of course, we could get the vagal nerve issues. I will say that I love using vagal nerve stim for people with anxiety. I also like using for back to your niece. So a vagal nerve stim, which is portable. And then also things like a sublingual L-theanine, a sublingual GABA to just curb it. Because the moment we're anxious, we're spending money as though we don't have to pay back the credit card.
Right.
And then what's the counterpart? We use all the brain chemistry, and we've all had this on a fun trip. We have the emotional letdown. Oh, okay, back to the drive. That's also, you left the brain chemistry on the beach or at Disneyland or wherever. So anxiety, you're blowing your chemistry like, yeah. And then there's a letdown. So it's, we used to call it this thymic of the ebb and flow. Of course, there's bipolar. There's extremes, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, generic bipolar where you go up, but then there's a down. And so we need to conserve. A penny saved is a penny earned. And I think sharing philosophy with the young people is very important, and us old people too. Listening to the Stoics, Stoicism, and the philosophies of you can only do what you can do. And it's like, and you can only
read that one, but the Daily Stoic.
Yes.
I don't know if you have this book. I've read through this. This is maybe my 7th year. I give this to so many people. It is fantastic. So it's a quote from a Marcus Aurelius or somebody.
Yes.
And then kind of the understanding of the author, Ryan Holiday, who's, kind of a relatively famous author in reference to Stoic philosophy. It's such a good book. I should get you a copy.
Thank you. Yeah. And see, I'm a multitasker. So what I do is when I'm working, I'll either have Mozart playing, and many of you of the audience knows about the Mozart study by Dr. Kamata, MD, PhD, Dr. Kamata, about how it altered Th1, Th2 receptors and allergic burden. So my wife came in one time, she says, what are you listening to? Because I'm more of a kid rock, hip hop kind of person, which people would never guess about me. And she says, what are you listening to? Classical? And my wife grew up playing the piano. So I said, yeah. She says, why? Like, have you lost your mind?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
What
said,
happened?
no, actually, there's a study showing that if you listen to Mozart, they actually can decrease their allergic response. It was birch tree season here in Oregon, the white tree.
Right.
And it's when or whatever color car you have is now a lime green color if you're under a birch tree. And she says, is that helping? I said, yeah, my arms aren't itchy anymore.
Yeah.
And so, there, once again, well, if you had told me 20 years ago that music could actually alter the Th1, Th2 receptor, which we didn't even know back then about, those levels of the immune system, I would have just thought that was all woo-woo or hogwash.
Yeah.
And it's like all of a sudden now there's studies showing that indeed the harmony or the frequency in which we immerse ourselves, and of course we can go to 100,000 megahertz and what its effects are on different kinds of abnormal cells. It's like we are ourselves a frequency. We know for the last, I think, 3 or 4 decades now that fluorescent lights were 10 megahertz off our frequency. And so what about these phones? What frequency are they? And are they in tune with us? So I listen to Stoicism and other just edifying things. And I personally, much like I tell my young family, adult kids, the news is not going to be edifying for you.
Right.
I said, if you want to hear the news, I'll come up with the worst case scenario. I'll tell you at dinner without a phone, and you'll see if it hasn't happened, it probably will.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's not very stoic of me. I apologize.
Right. So just to kind of let's wrap things up a little bit here, but so we were talking about pain and sleep, and what pearls, tell me a little bit more or share with the audience, what are some key takeaways, around this discussion? What do you want them to know?
With aging, even if we had no blue light spectrum and just ancestrally with aging, our melatonin levels drop. And so daily routine of some melatonin at bedtime, I think just makes great sense. I'm not worried with the down regulation of a feedback loop like we would with pituitary hypothalamic pathway. There's been all this press about, well, if you take melatonin, I'm going to take melatonin regardless of what the theory is that it might somehow down regulate, because it has the anti-inflammatory, immunological sides of things. Sadly enough, my younger sister has metastatic breast cancer, and she was just told by a medical oncologist that's functional medicine to bump up to 1,000 milligrams of melatonin per night.
1,000?
1,000. And so, in my world, it's 50 to 60 is a pretty stiff dose, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm not proposing that he's correct or not, but once again, you're using it as a tool, but a daily augmentation, making up for.
What would you say is kind of a good target for melatonin for the average person? They just want to sleep a little bit better.
I think anywhere from 1 milligram to 5 to 10 milligrams.
Okay.
And once again, the concept is we like to nudge the biochemistry and don't like to shove it. Just the right amount to get the job done without throwing the body into disharmony or altering homeostasis. Because even though it's natural, it doesn't always make it safe. One of my big lectures that was popular 25 years ago when I was lecturing at the local medical school. And so I think we augment and move the needle. On the melatonin side of things, I like to use it with the beta caryophyllene. I like to use it with CBD. I like to use it as a composite to support the endocannabinoid system. And there's products out there that offer all of those. Because one of the problems our patients have is pill fatigue.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I'm just looking just on my desk in front of me proper, 12 bottles.
Yeah.
And that's not even my active bottles. My active bottles are a surround around my monitor. And we won't even tell you how many bottles are there. And it's like, okay, well, do I need all those? No. Do I take all those intermittently, but they're here for rapid access, out of mind, out of sight. But I think it was Thomas Edison that said the prime function of the body is to carry around the mind. And none of us want to succumb to Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is on the rise. We know autism is on the rise. We know attention deficit is on the rise. So we have the 3 A's. And because we're now feeding ourselves with shorts off the internet of little snips, and our attention has gone down to, some people have argued, below goldfish, which I think was about 7 seconds. But also we are fed pre-made stories. So I encourage all my young people to immerse themselves into old-time radio. Old-time radio where you would listen to Fibber McGee or Molly or The Whistler, Only the Sourdough Knows, or listen to an audio book and paint your own pictures in your own head and develop some neuroplasticity. And the other big thing that I use with all my patients with anxiety or PTSD or trauma is a program called zingperformance.com. It is a program that trains your cerebellum. And when we learned about our cerebellum back in the day, the cerebellum was, hey, this is when you start walking. And we know that if we put a kid in a walker before they actually learn how to walk themselves, but one of those little strolling walkers, we actually bypass part of that neurointegration. But the cerebellum is where 70% of our neurons in our entire brain are, even though it's the size of a walnut. And so training the cerebellum for athletics, competitive athletics or personal athletics, and training for attention deficit, autism. But there's a part of their program, they have multiple versions, all now app-device. Strangely enough, all technology-driven. You can do it on your phone or your tablet. But actually, certain exercise integrates the cerebellum. And there's a philosophy, what fires together, wires together. And so, and I will finish on theory. It's a theory I've came up with. I'm probably wrong, but we know that if you're right-handed, you're often, stimming your left side, which is very analytical and so forth. If you're using your left hand, which, I think 10% of the population might be left-handed upwards, well, then you're in your right mind, pun intended or not. I don't know. Right. If you're left-handed, you probably would argue you're in your right mind. And then it's like, but now what have we taught all these young people? To use two opposable thumbs, and boy, are they fast. If you try to chat with a family member that's young, I was like, okay, how did you write all those words? I'm still on the third word because I got one thumb that works that way. And it's like, well, how does all that firing early on in life with just two opposable thumbs alter the firing and wiring of the brain? And is that one reason the younger generation thinks quite a bit differently? And so back in the day, Elvis Presley was too rad and too much of a nemesis for modern humanity. And there was the Beatles and there was the Beach Boys. And we always have this generational gap between what's acceptable or not. But there's this huge change in the young person's mind. And is that in part the two opposable thumbs integrating and then being fed and not developing the ability to read a story out of a book. I'm still a book guy. I love breaking open a book and reading the black and white. And it's like, so, training the brain still to be creative and dynamic and wondering, using our opposable thumbs excessively, both left and right, is it going to not only cause arthritis and overuse syndrome? Yes. But is it also altering the way we think as human beings? It's a philosophy. It's a question.
Very interesting. Yeah.
It's just something I pondered. How do the things which we do on a daily basis alter who and how we are?
Well, certainly the foods we eat changes our microbiome, which changes brain chemistry, all sorts of things. So,
well, and I'm glad you brought that up. The altered microbiome, they actually did a study that just got published. If you had one antibiotic in the last 2 years, you're like, don't quote me here, but it's like 20% more likely to be depressed. If you had 2 antibiotics in the last couple of years, you're like 40% more likely to be depressed. Because we know our serotonin is made in our gut largely. Dopamine, still predominant amount in our gut. That's our contentment. That's our Winnie the Pooh-ness, our pot of honey. Just content. But all these antibiotics. And then I will raise another philosophy of mine, another ponderance. I'm not saying my ponderances are correct because I do look at my phone. So I'm probably jaded with all the technology altering my neurotransmitters. But I only use one thumb to text. Is if we go, and back in the day when I was growing up, we would wear a swimsuit in the swimming pool. Swimming pool, the neighborhood swimming pool. Now, of course, a swim attire, swim whatever, But you wore a swimsuit or rather a bathing suit because you're publicly bathing. And so they chlorinate the water, which kills the bacteria that's coming off, one's backside even. And that's supposedly you're supposed to shower, which, most people don't, let alone shower they recommend. So what happens when we drink a whole lot of chlorinated municipal water? Does that chlorine or chloramines alter our microbiome as well?
Food for thought.
Yeah, you would think. And of course, the antibiotics in our foods or chicken breasts, other things, so I think, there's an active process of altering our microbiome. My 18th book that I wrote, which is free on Kindle Unlimited, is called the MMM. It's a microbiome mucosal milieu. And it talks about the skin microbiome, the eye microbiome, nasal microbiome, vaginal, pelvic, prostate, blood, brain microbiome, and all these little MMMs contribute to our larger MMM. And so we have all these little microbiomes, little forests, but the whole forest in unison works. And so there's a lot of crosstalk that we haven't given credit for. So the book goes over some 254 pages about what we do know in the peer review literature about all these different microbiomes. But if a person has eczema or atopic dermatitis, and they've been told to, by the standard medical model, take a bleach bath, wipe out your friendly bacteria because you have all these infected wounds from scratching. Well, how do you re-inoculate the skin microbiome?
Right.
Well, we know about fecal transplants. So I actually have a theory that I came up with. Once again, problems with sitting in front of my computer so long and listening to Mozart and Stoicism is I come up with random thoughts. Is like, well, I came up with the pajama theory. So let's say you mentioned a son that has a master's degree. One of you is super healthy. Another one has a little bit of a skin issue, some eczema, atopic dermatitis. Well, what I would propose, and I'm not diagnosing or treating anybody here that's listening, that it might not be a healthcare provider. Well, I would encourage one of the healthier of the two of you with no skin issues to wear a equivalent of a sweatshirt and sweatpants, and then wear them for 2 or 3 days, and then give the dirty clothes to the recipient and have them wear your dirty clothes for a few days and re-inoculate their skin microbiome. I call it pajama theory.
I like it. That's very cool.
And it is somewhat gender specific. If you're a female, you have a little different skin microbiome in certain parts of the body than a male. Sure. But yeah, and it's worked. I've used it with my patients because how am I going to re-inoculate otherwise a disharmonious skin? I can give them all the probiotics eternally, but they need to have a re-inoculation of the skin microbiome and stop bleaching themselves with a bleach bath.
Wow. Well, thank you, Chris. This was another great podcast, and love having you on the show. And I think we covered a lot of great stuff around sleep, some good recommendations and advice, both for practitioners or if a patient happens to be listening. Always recommend that if that's the case, you talk to your practitioner. We're not providing medical advice here, but this was great. And again, I will provide some links to the resource center with some chapters from your book on the endocannabinoid system. We've got things in there about pain, also about sleep we'll refer to, and also that webinar that we talked about on this topic that we actually just put in the newsletter last week. And so I'll share that as well. But once again, thank you so much, Chris. Really loved having you on the show.
Thank you. I love being there. I love my rabbit trails, as the audience knows. And I also love learning from my colleagues. So anybody that wants to email me with a pearl or wisdom, I'll incorporate it into my lectures because we're all better together than apart.
Yeah. Include the link to your email address and your website as well. And again, thanks so much, Chris. And I'll see you on the next episode, as I'll have you back. Love it. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the One Medicine Podcast. I hope you found today's episode interesting and came away with a few insights you can apply to your practice. If you're looking for the show notes, they can be found in the link below. If you want to go deeper on this topic or anything else, please visit todayspractitioner.com and consider registering for our weekly newsletter as well. Thanks again, and I hope you'll join us next time.